All right, got a quiz coming up on the Northern Renaissance and the Reformation? Well, you've come to the right place. We're going to break down exactly what you need to know. We'll see how a single protest, a brand new piece of tech, and a pretty corrupt system created this massive domino effect that, honestly, changed the world forever.
So let's just start with the big question, right? How in the world did one monk's ideas go viral like centuries before the internet even existed? It sounds kind of impossible, but that's exactly what happened. A single document, nailed to a church door, kicked off a chain reaction that literally split a continent. And we're going to trace every single step of how it went down.
And here's our game plan. We're going to follow this whole story like a series of falling dominoes, which would make it super easy to remember for your test. First, the spark of new ideas. Then, the amplifier that made them loud. Next, the flashpoint where things got tense. Then we'll see the impact of one man's protest, and finally, the fallout of a continent divided. So, let's get started and tip over that first domino.
Okay, so, domino number one. It wasn't a big event, it was an idea. You see, the Renaissance started in Italy, but it didn't just stay there. As these new ways of thinking about human potential and learning traveled north, up through the trade routes, they started to change. They adapted to the cultures in places like Germany and England.
And here is a major distinction you are absolutely going to want to remember for your quiz. The Italian Renaissance, that was all about reviving the classical beauty of ancient Greece and Rome. Think art and philosophy. But the Northern Renaissance took that same excitement for learning and pointed it in a different direction. Their focus was on religious reform and everyday life. Their goal wasn't just about making better art, it was about creating better Christians.
Okay, here's our first key term you'll need to know: Christian humanism. Now, this wasn't about getting rid of faith or anything like that. It was about using logic, reason, and classical learning to become better Christians, and to fix the problems they were seeing in the church. So, the key takeaway here is that their goal was reform, not a full-blown revolution. At least, not yet.
And the big names, the intellectual heavyweights of this movement, were guys like Erasmus and Sir Thomas More. Erasmus, he used humor and satire to poke fun at the church's flaws, while More wrote this book, Utopia, imagining what a perfect, ideal society would look like. They were basically planting the seeds of change by getting people to think critically about the world they lived in.
But, how do a few scholars' ideas actually reach the average person on the street? How does that first domino get enough momentum to knock over the next one? Well, that brings us to our second domino, the amplifier, a truly game-changing piece of technology.
It's really hard for us to wrap our heads around this today, but before the mid-1400s, every single book had to be copied out by hand. I mean, can you imagine? This made them incredibly rare, unbelievably expensive, and just totally out of reach for almost everybody. Knowledge was basically locked away.
And this is our next essential vocabulary word: movable type. This was Johann Gutenberg's stroke of genius. Instead of carving a whole page from a block of wood, you could just arrange individual metal letters to make your words, print as many pages as you needed, and then, here's the kicker, reuse the letters for the next page. It was efficient, it was modular, and it changed literally everything.
The impact was just staggering. All of a sudden, books became affordable, literacy rates started to climb because, hey, there was actually something for people to read. And most importantly for our story, those new ideas from the Christian humanists could now zip across Europe faster than ever before. The printing press was the engine that was going to power this whole movement.
So what have we got? We've got new, challenging ideas being spread by this incredible new technology. As more people started reading and thinking for themselves, they began to look a lot more critically at the biggest, most powerful institution in their lives, the Catholic Church. And, what a lot of them saw really worried them. It was a crisis waiting to happen.
By the 1500s, let's just say the church had a bit of a PR problem. Many people felt that its leaders were way more interested in money and political power than in, spiritual guidance. The institution looked grand on the outside, sure, but on the inside there was widespread corruption. And one practice in particular became the symbol for everything that was wrong. Seriously, think about that for a second. What if getting into heaven wasn't about faith, or doing good deeds, or being a good person, but just about having enough money to buy your way in? That was the pretty shocking idea at the heart of the most controversial practice of the day.
And this brings us to another critical vocabulary word for your quiz, the indulgence. Pay attention to this one. This was an official piece of paper sold by the church that promised forgiveness for your sins. To a lot of people, it looked an awful lot like the church was selling tickets to heaven. And this was the fuse that was about to light the whole thing up.
So the stage is set, right? You've got widespread discontent, you've got radical new ideas, and you have a technology to spread them. All it needed was a spark, and that spark came from a German monk and professor, a guy named Martin Luther. And the funny thing is, he never meant to start a revolution. He just wanted to have a debate.
This is the moment it all goes down. In 1517, Luther writes up his 95 Theses, basically 95 talking points against selling indulgences, and he nails them to the church door in Wittenberg. Now, without the printing press, this probably would have just been a local argument among professors. But thanks to Gutenberg, his theses were printed, copied, and spread all across Germany in a matter of weeks. His protest went viral.
Luther's arguments really came down to three huge revolutionary ideas. First, salvation comes through faith alone. You can't buy it. Second, the Bible is the one and only true authority, more important than the Pope. And third, the priesthood of all believers. That meant anyone, any regular person, could read and interpret the Bible for themselves. These 3 points were a direct challenge to the entire power structure of the Catholic Church.
And you just can't challenge power like that and expect nothing to happen. The Pope and the Holy Roman Emperor, we're talking the most powerful men in Europe, they had to respond. Luther's protest was about to knock over the final biggest dominoes, and it would lead to a permanent split right down the middle of Western Christianity.
And look at this timeline. You can see just how fast things spun out of control. In only 4 years, we go from a scholarly debate to a massive crisis. By 1521, Luther is put on trial at a meeting called the Diet of Worms. And that same year, the Pope officially excommunicates him, kicks him out of the church for good.
And this is the dramatic climax of the whole story. The emperor demands that Luther take it all back, recant everything he said. And Luther, knowing that this could get him killed, refuses. He says famously, "Here I stand, I can do no other." In that moment, the break was final. There was no turning back.
This whole domino effect we've just been talking about, well, it has a name, and it's our next key term, the Reformation. What began as a movement to simply reform the Catholic Church ended up creating a permanent split, giving birth to brand new branches of Christianity.
And that leads us to our final key term, Protestant. Where did the name come from? It literally came from a group of German princes who protested the emperor's actions against Luther. Pretty soon, that name stuck, and it became the label for all Christians who belonged to these new, non-Catholic churches that grew out of the Reformation.
Okay, let's wrap this up. Here's your final review slide, your cheat sheet for the quiz. If you can remember these 4 points, you are golden. Number 1, the Northern Renaissance sparked ideas about reform. 2, the printing press made those ideas spread like crazy. 3, Luther's 95 Theses was the protest against indulgences that lit the match. And 4, the result was the Reformation, which permanently split the church in Western Europe.
And let's end with one last thought, something to connect all this history back to our world. Gutenberg's printing press was the disruptive tech of its day. It completely changed how information moved and who held the power. So, what technology is playing that same role today? Something to think about. Good luck on your quiz.